Australia can make survival look impossible. In the dry months, the land seems to tighten under the sun. Creek beds shrink into chains of warm puddles, grass yellows at the edges. Eucalyptus leaves hang with that hard, dusty stillness that comes before fire, and the air itself feels as if it has been baked clean of mercy. For an animal with feathers, fur, scales, or a deep burrow, there are at least obvious tools for endurance. But then, in the middle of this harsh country, there is a soft green frog with skin that must stay moist, a body that can lose water through every exposed surface, and no armor at all. At first glance, the Australian green tree frog looks like the wrong animal for this place. It seems built for rain, leaves, and cool nights, not heat that can turn metal hot enough to burn. And yet this frog has not survived Australia by being stronger than the drought. It has survived by becoming slower than it. When the weather is kind, the frog belongs to the night. It emerges after sunset, when the ground releases the day's heat and insects begin to gather around lamps, wet leaves, drains, and verandas. Its movements are calm, almost lazy, but there is nothing careless about them. A moth lands too close and disappears in a sudden snap of the mouth. A cockroach crossing a wall becomes a meal. Around houses and sheds, the frog can seem almost domestic, sitting near windows as if it has discovered that humans, by accident, are excellent insect farmers. Light attracts prey. Gutters hold moisture. Pipes offer shade. In a country where survival often depends on using every small advantage, even a bathroom can become habitat. That is why these frogs sometimes appear in toilets, drain pipes, water tanks, and roof spaces, creating the strange little shock of finding a wild amphibian calmly waiting in the most human corner of a house. But the real story begins when the rain stops. A frog is tied to water more intimately than most animals. Its skin is not just a covering, it is part of how the body breathes, balances salts, and exchanges moisture with the world. That makes amphibians powerful indicators of environmental stress, but it also makes them vulnerable. Dry air is not just uncomfortable to a frog, it is a slow threat, pulling life out through the skin. The green tree frog answers that threat with a quiet change in strategy. It retreats into cool, sheltered places where the sun cannot easily reach. Tree hollows, crevices, loose bark, pipes, tanks, wall cavities, and any damp refuge that can hold a trace of humidity. Then its body slows. The restless night hunter becomes a sealed, waiting thing. This dormancy is not sleep in the simple sense. It is an energy decision. When conditions outside become too costly, the frog reduces activity, lowers its demand for food and water, and waits for the environment to become usable again. In dry periods, moisture becomes the most valuable currency in the landscape, and the frog guards it with remarkable care. Its skin can produce secretions that help reduce evaporation, forming a protective coating that acts like a living barrier between the body and the air. In some dry refuges, frogs may also use layers of shed skin and mucus as a kind of cocoon, turning their own body surface into part of the shelter. There is something almost ironic in it. The animal that looks too delicate for drought survives by wrapping itself in its own biology. Water, when it returns, does not enter this frog in the way most people imagine. It does not lower its head and drink like a dog or a kangaroo. Frogs absorb water through the skin, especially through a specialized area on the underside of the body, often called the drinking patch or pelvic patch. The frog presses this region against damp surfaces and takes water directly through the skin into the body. In the wild, that might mean wet bark, soaked leaves, muddy ground, or the inside of a shaded hollow after rain. In a human landscape, it might mean a drain, a laundry, a toilet bowl, or the wet rim of a garden pot. What looks funny to us is completely practical to the frog. It is not being strange. It is refilling itself through its belly. The skin itself is more than a water problem. It is also a chemical frontier. Amphibian skin is constantly exposed to bacteria, fungi, parasites, and tiny injuries from the rough surfaces of bark, stone, and soil. For the green tree frog, staying moist means keeping a doorway open to the microbial world. Evolution has answered that danger with chemistry. The frog's skin secretions contain compounds that can help defend against microbes, and some of these peptides have attracted scientific interest because of their antibacterial and other biomedical possibilities. In the frog's life, these compounds are not medicine in the human sense. They are everyday survival tools, part of a defensive film that protects a soft animal living in dirty, humid living places. But to scientists, the same chemical defenses offer clues about new ways to understand infection, immunity, and the hidden pharmacy of wild skin. When rain finally breaks the drought, the transformation is immediate. The land that seemed empty begins to move. Termites lift from the ground, beetles crawl from cracks, moths crowd the lights, and the frog comes back into the open. Its call carries from gutters, branches, tanks, and ponds, a rough sound that belongs to warm, wet nights. Breeding depends on water, so rain does more than refresh the body. It opens the next chapter of the species. Males call near still pools and temporary water. Females arrive when conditions are right, and eggs are left to begin the dangerous passage from jelly to tadpole to frog. In these shallow waters, survival is never guaranteed. Tadpoles feed and grow under pressure from aquatic insects, fish, birds, and drying pools. The same rain that creates a nursery can vanish quickly, turning time itself into a predator. Adult green tree frogs live between worlds. They climb, but they depend on water. They hunt insects, but they are hunted by snakes, birds, and larger predators. They shelter in trees, but they also move comfortably through the strange, artificial forests humans build: pipes, fences, bathrooms, tanks, and sheds. Their success comes from flexibility. They are not desert specialists in the way some Australian frogs are, buried deep underground for years. They are something subtler, a moisture-dependent animal that has learned how to negotiate dryness without giving up the advantages of the surface world. That is what makes the green tree frog such a strong opening to Australia's survival story. It does not look like a creature of extremes, but its body is built around one of the hardest problems on the continent: how to stay alive when the air itself is stealing water from you. It survives by hiding, sealing, slowing down, absorbing water through its belly, and turning its skin into both shield and science lab. In a land famous for teeth, venom, claws, and speed, this frog offers a quieter kind of toughness. It does not conquer the heat. It waits it out, sealed in the dark, until the first real rain touches the roof, the pipes, the bark, and the ground, and the soft green survivor opens its eyes again. In the Australian bush, danger does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it comes as a shadow passing over leaves, a beak testing the branches, a lizard climbing with patient claws, or a spider waiting under bark for anything careless enough to move. In a world like this, being fast helps, being venomous helps, being heavily armored helps. But the stick insect follows a stranger rule of survival. It survives by making the predator doubt that there is an animal here at all. At first, the eye rejects it. The branch is just a branch. A narrow brown line rests among the leaves, angled like a dry twig caught in the fork of a shrub. Its legs are folded along the body in ways that break the familiar shape of an insect. Its color is not bright enough to advertise, not smooth enough to stand out, not symmetrical enough to feel alive. Even its stillness feels plant-like. The camera may stare straight at it, and still the mind keeps searching for the animal somewhere else. That is the genius of the stick insect. It does not simply hide behind the environment. It becomes part of the environment's grammar. This kind of camouflage is more than matching color. Many animals are brown or green, but a stick insect has taken imitation further, reshaping the body into a lie that predators understand too well. Birds and reptiles scan vegetation for movement, eyes, body curves, exposed limbs, and the tiny mistakes living things make when they breathe, feed, or turn. A stick insect removes as many of those clues as possible. Its long body copies a stem. Its legs imitate splinters and side shoots. Its posture interrupts the outline of an animal. Even when it moves, it does so with caution, sometimes rocking gently as if stirred by wind. That small sway matters. A completely still twig is believable, but a twig moving with the branch is even better. This is survival through psychology. The predator's eyes may receive the image, but the brain does not always classify it as food. For an insect that should be easy prey, that delay is everything. A bird only has so much time to search before it spends more energy than the meal is worth. A lizard moving through leaves cannot inspect every twig. Predators make quick decisions, and camouflage works by poisoning those decisions with doubt. The stick insect does not need to outrun the attack if it can prevent the attack from being launched. At night, when many stick insects become more active, the disguise shifts from statue to slow machinery. The insect begins to feed on leaves, chewing from the edge with quiet, precise mouthparts. It is not a dramatic hunter or a territorial fighter. It is a herbivore, a soft-bodied consumer of vegetation, turning leaves into growth, eggs, and eventually food for other animals. In the ecosystem, it belongs to the middle layer of life, where plant matter becomes insect tissue, and insect tissue becomes fuel for birds, spiders, reptiles, and mammals. Its camouflage is not an escape from the food web. It is a negotiation with it. Some will be eaten. Enough must be missed. The larger Australian species make that negotiation even stranger. A giant stick insect can be long enough to look almost impossible when finally seen, as if a branch has made the decision to walk away. In the rainforests of Queensland, some of these insects reach sizes that push the limits of what people expect an insect to be. The recently described giant Acrophila alta has drawn attention because females may rank among Australia's heaviest known insects, a reminder that even in a well-studied country, the canopy still hides life large enough to surprise science. Its existence says something important about Australia's forests. Not everything rare is small, and not everything large is obvious. But size comes with problems. A heavy insect cannot simply vanish through speed. Large females are often less mobile than males, and in some species, the males are slimmer, winged, and better able to travel in search of mates, while females remain heavier, slower, and more tied to vegetation. This creates a survival strategy built around patience and placement. A female that looks like a dead leaf, bark fragment, or broken twig can remain in one useful area, feed, avoid detection, and produce eggs without advertising her presence. The body may be strange, but the logic is clean. If movement is dangerous, move less. If shape gives you away, change the meaning of your shape. Then comes one of the strangest turns in the story. Some female stick insects can reproduce without a male. Parthenogenesis allows a female to lay viable eggs even when mating has not occurred. For a slow, hidden insect living in scattered vegetation, this can be a powerful backup system. Finding a mate is not always easy when your whole survival strategy is to look like a piece of plant debris and avoid attracting attention. In that context, reproduction without males is not just a biological curiosity, it is a solution to isolation. The same invisibility that protects the insect could also make encounters rare, and evolution has given some species a way to continue the line even when the opposite sex never arrives. The eggs themselves often deepen the disguise. Many phasmid eggs look more like seeds than insect eggs, small capsules dropped or flicked away from the female onto the forest floor. There, they disappear into leaf litter, soil, and plant debris. Some have structures that attract ants, which may carry them into nests and discard them later in protected waste areas, accidentally giving the developing insect a safer place to wait. The story of the stick insect does not begin with a tiny version of an adult clinging to a branch. It often begins as a false seed hidden among real ones, another stage in a life built around mistaken identity. Even injury does not always end the story. In young stick insects, a lost leg can sometimes be regrown through later molts. This is not magic, and it is not free. Regeneration costs resources. Energy used to rebuild a limb cannot be spent elsewhere without consequence, and studies on stick insects show that regrowing legs can affect later development, including flight performance in species that fly. But the trade-off makes sense in the moment. If a predator grabs a leg and the insect escapes with the rest of its body intact, the missing limb is the price of survival. A perfect body is useless if it remains inside a bird. And if camouflage fails completely, some stick insects still have one last answer. Certain species can release defensive chemicals, an unpleasant spray or secretion that makes the predator regret its confidence. Others raise the body, flare wings, expose spines, or mimic something more dangerous than they are. A creature that spent its life pretending to be a twig may suddenly become a bad-tasting surprise, a spiky threat pose, or a chemical warning. The illusion changes, but the purpose stays the same. Buy one more second, create one more hesitation, survive one more attack. That is why the stick insect belongs after the frog in this story. The frog survives by enduring the climate, sealing moisture inside its body until the land becomes gentle again. The stick insect survives in a different arena, the attention of predators. It turns stillness into armor, shape into deception, reproduction into backup, and even injury into a survivable trade. In the Australian bush, where almost everything is watching or being watched, this delicate insect has found a way to live in plain sight. It does not dominate the forest. It edits itself out of the scene so perfectly that the branch beside you may already be alive. The outback does not warm gently. It wakes like metal left in the sun. By mid-morning, the red ground begins to shimmer. Spinifex throws thin shadows over sand, and the trunks of scattered shrubs hold the heat like dark bone. A bird passing overhead can cross the whole scene without finding much shade. In this place, heat is not background weather, it is pressure. It presses into stone, dries the edges of leaves, empties puddles, and tests every living body that remains exposed for too long. For most animals, the sensible choice is retreat. go underground, wait for night, move only when the sun has lost its power. But on a stump, fence post, or low branch above the baked earth, a bearded dragon lifts itself into the light as if the furnace is exactly where it belongs. This is the strange advantage of being an ectotherm in a brutal landscape. The bearded dragon does not burn energy constantly to hold one fixed internal temperature the way a mammal does. Its body temperature is shaped by the outside world, and that means the sun is both danger and fuel. Too little warmth and the muscles slow, digestion drags and reaction time fades. Too much and the same sunlight becomes lethal. Survival depends on precision. The dragon must read heat the way another animal reads scent. It climbs above the ground to bask, lowers its body to catch warmth, shifts angle when the radiation becomes too strong, opens its mouth when blood needs cooling, and moves between sun and shade with the calm urgency of an animal making calculations every minute. Its skin is part of that calculation. In cooler conditions, a bearded dragon can darken parts of its body, absorbing more solar energy and warming more efficiently. Under harsher light, it may become paler, reflecting more radiation and reducing the load on the body. This is not the dramatic flash of a chameleon vanishing into leaves. It is a thermal tool, subtle but powerful, a living surface adjusting how much of the desert's energy is allowed in. The body becomes a kind of biological solar panel, darkening when heat is useful and lightening when heat turns dangerous. In a place where a few degrees can separate full alertness from collapse, color is not decoration. It is survival infrastructure. Even the famous beard is more than a name. At rest, the spiny throat can look like part of the lizard's rough outline, a textured collar under the jaw. But when a rival appears, or a predator comes too close, the dragon changes. The throat darkens, sometimes turning nearly black, and the beard pushes outward as the body inflates. The mouth opens, the sides stiffen. A lizard that moments ago looked flat and sun-drunk suddenly becomes larger, darker, and more difficult to swallow. This is not empty theater. Many predators make fast judgments about risk. A bird of prey, a goanna, a snake, a dingo, a fox or a cat may still attack, but the display buys hesitation. It says the meal may not be as simple as it looked. From a distance, the scene can seem almost exaggerated. A small reptile standing its ground in a continent built on extremes. But the bearded dragon's strength is not recklessness, it is communication. These lizards do not waste energy fighting every animal that crosses their territory. Among themselves, they use a language of posture, color, head movement, and gesture. A dominant dragon may bob its head and darken the beard, turning the whole front of the body into a signal of force. A smaller or less dominant dragon may answer with the famous arm wave, lifting one forelimb and moving it slowly through the air. To human eyes, it looks almost polite, like a tiny desert greeting. In dragon language, it is closer to surrender. It reduces tension before a confrontation becomes injury. That little wave reveals something important about survival in harsh places. Violence is expensive. A wounded limb, damaged eye, or torn mouth can mean slower hunting, poorer escape, and less ability to regulate position in the sun. So the body evolves signals that prevent unnecessary combat. The bearded dragon is not only adapted to heat, it is adapted to living around other bearded dragons under conditions where every mistake costs water, time, and energy. A gesture that looks delicate can be a very practical peace treaty. Its feeding life is just as opportunistic. The dragon watches from raised positions where heat, visibility, and hunting overlap. Insects move through dry grass. Beetles work under debris. Ants cross open ground. Flowers, shoots and leaves become seasonal food when available. The bearded dragon is an omnivore, and in the outback, that flexibility matters. A specialist waits for the right meal. A survivor takes what the season offers. After rain, the landscape may briefly explode with insects and new plant growth. During leaner stretches, food becomes scattered, and the dragon's patience becomes part of the hunt. It does not need to chase constantly. It waits, warms, watches, and strikes when the distance is small enough to make the movement worth it. The most hidden adaptation begins before the animal ever sees the sun. Inside the egg, development is shaped by temperature and timing. In reptiles, incubation conditions can influence how quickly embryos develop, how long they remain in the nest, and what kind of body they bring into the world. Bearded dragon eggs are laid underground, protected from the most violent swings of surface heat, but still tied to the thermal rhythm of the soil. Development can be delayed or slowed when conditions are not ideal, helping hatchlings emerge at a time when survival chances are better. In a dry landscape, timing is not a detail. A hatchling that appears into the wrong heat, the wrong food supply, or the wrong moisture conditions begins life already in debt. When the young finally break through, they enter the same world of heat and judgment as the adults, only smaller and more vulnerable. Their shadows are tiny, their bodies warm quickly, their enemies are everywhere. Yet the same toolkit is already present in miniature, basking, hiding, signaling, feeding when opportunity appears, and learning the invisible map of hot and cool places around them. A rock is not just a rock. One side is morning warmth. One crack is afternoon shade. One branch is a watchtower. One patch of open sand is a dangerous crossing. The outback is read through the skin. That is why the bearded dragon belongs in this escalation of impossible survivors. The frog endures dryness by sealing moisture and waiting. The stick insect survives by disappearing from the predator's attention. The bearded dragon faces a different enemy, heat that can power the body or destroy it. It survives by controlling exposure, changing color, communicating before conflict, timing reproduction, and turning the harsh Australian sun into both weapon and resource. It does not defeat the outback by ignoring its extremes. It survives because every scale, gesture, and pause is part of an ancient negotiation with heat. The first sign of a wombat is often not the animal. It is the earth itself, opened like a doorway. On a cold Australian evening, when the heat has drained out of the grass and the light begins to flatten across the slopes, the burrow waits under a bank of soil, half hidden by roots, stones, and dry leaves. Around it are tracks pressed into the ground by repeated use, scratch marks near the entrance, and small cube-shaped droppings placed where scent can travel and other wombats will notice. The scene does not look dramatic at first. There are no fangs flashing in the open, no sudden strike from a branch, no bright warning colors. But this entrance is part of a fortress, and the animal inside is built less like a soft marsupial than a slow piece of moving engineering. The wombat appears with the heavy confidence of an animal that has never needed to look elegant. Its body is low, muscular, and compact, carried on short, powerful legs with claws made for tearing into soil. It does not sprint across the landscape like a kangaroo or vanish into the trees like a possum. It works through the ground. Every feature seems designed for friction, leverage, and pressure. A broad head, thick shoulders, dense bones, strong forelimbs, and a body that can force its way through earth that would stop many other animals cold. In Australian forests, grasslands and scrub, this is a different kind of survival strategy. The wombat does not escape the surface by flying, climbing, or flashing away. It builds another world underneath it. A wombat burrow can run deep and long, sometimes stretching many meters through the soil, branching into chambers where temperature and humidity are more stable than the open air. That matters in a country where daytime heat, cold nights, drought, fire and predators can all make the surface dangerous. Underground, the wombat finds protection from weather and threat at the same time. The burrow is shelter, sleeping place, nursery, escape route and climate control system. During the day, the animal can remain hidden inside while the surface hardens under sunlight. At dusk or night, it emerges to graze, cutting grasses and roots with strong teeth that continue growing through life, wearing down against tough plant material and grit. From a predator's point of view, a wombat should be a manageable target. It is not sleek. It is not visibly armed. It is slow enough to look catchable and rounded enough to look vulnerable. That judgment is a mistake. When threatened, a wombat's best defense is often not to turn and fight in the open, but to retreat into the geometry of its own tunnel. There, the rules change. A fox, dog or dingo trying to follow it into the burrow does not meet the soft belly or exposed throat of prey. It meets the rear end of the wombat, a hard shield of tough skin, dense tissue, and a reinforced rump supported by a bony sacral plate. The entrance becomes too narrow for easy maneuvering, and the predator is forced to attack the one part of the animal best designed to take punishment. This is where the wombat becomes almost absurdly effective. It can plug the tunnel with its backside, leaving the attacker with little to bite except thick hide and hardened tissue. In that confined space, the wombat also controls the direction of force. If the intruder pushes deeper, the wombat can drive backward and upward against the roof or wall of the burrow, pinning the attacker in a place where teeth and speed are far less useful. Stories of predators being crushed against the tunnel roof come from this brutal underground physics. Whether every dramatic version is true or not, the principle is real enough. Inside its burrow, the wombat turns its stocky body into a living barricade. The animal that looked slow above ground becomes dangerously difficult to move below it. Its toughness is not limited to defense. Wombats are ecosystem engineers. By digging, they disturb soil, create shelter, influence drainage, and leave burrow systems that can be used or visited by other animals. In dry or fire-affected landscapes, wombat burrows may become important refuges for small creatures seeking cooler, safer microclimates. The wombat is not doing this out of generosity. It is building for itself. But evolution often produces side effects that matter to whole communities. A burrow made for one heavy herbivore can alter the lives of insects, reptiles, mammals, and the plants that grow around loosened soil. Then there is the detail almost everyone remembers: the cubes. Wombats produce cube-shaped droppings, a biological oddity so strange it sounds invented for a children's book, yet it comes from the real mechanics of the gut. The shape is formed inside the intestine, where differences in elasticity and contraction help mold the dry feces into flat-sided pieces before they leave the body. The result is not just a novelty. Wombats use droppings to mark feeding areas, pathways, logs, rocks, and burrow entrances. A round pellet might roll away from an exposed stone. A cube stays where it is placed, turning a strange piece of digestive engineering into a scent marker that holds its position in the landscape. This matters because wombat life is not as socially empty as it may first appear. They are mostly solitary, but their worlds overlap through scent, trails, burrows, and boundary messages. A dropping on a rock is not random waste, it is information. It tells another wombat that this space is occupied, that a particular animal has passed here, and that the area may not be worth challenging. In a life where direct fights can cause serious injury, scent marking helps reduce conflict before bodies collide. Even the cube, ridiculous as it looks to us, becomes part of a serious communication system. The humor is real, but so is the function. At night, the wombat moves with quiet force through grass and scrub, cropping vegetation close to the ground. Its senses are tuned to a world of smell, soil, and familiar paths. It may look blunt, but it is not careless. The ears turn toward disturbance. The nose works constantly. If alarmed, it can move surprisingly fast for short distances, charging toward the nearest burrow with a momentum that makes its shape suddenly make sense. Every kilogram becomes useful. Every compact muscle has a purpose. The body is not slow because it failed to become agile. It is slow because it invested in power, digging, endurance, and defense. This is why the wombat changes the rhythm of the story. The frog survived by sealing water inside a fragile body. The stick insect survived by becoming a twig in the predator's mind. The bearded dragon survived by negotiating with heat through color, posture, and timing. The wombat survives by changing the battlefield itself. Above ground, it may appear awkward and almost harmless. Underground, inside a tunnel shaped by its claws and body, it becomes a tank with the door facing backward. Its strangeness is not a joke added to Australian wildlife. It is the result of an animal taking soil, muscle, digestion, scent, and armor, and turning them into one of the most unlikely defensive systems on the continent. At dawn, over a shallow Australian bay, the sea looks almost too gentle to belong in a survival story. Light moves through the water in long green ribbons, crossing the pale sand and the dark seams of seagrass below. Tiny fish flicker between blades. A turtle passes like a shadow with a shell. Somewhere beyond the reef edge, sharks patrol deeper blue, but here the world is quiet, filtered through tide, sunlight, and drifting silt. Then the seabed itself seems to rise. A broad grey shape moves out of the meadow, slow and heavy, with a rounded body, a whale-like tail, and a face that looks less like a predator than an old memory. This is the dugong, the gentle giant of Australia's coastal waters, and its survival story is not built on speed, teeth, venom, or armor. It is built on patience. The dugong is often called a sea cow, and for once the nickname is not completely wrong. It grazes, it lowers its head to the seabed and pulls seagrass with thick, sensitive lips, leaving pale feeding trails through the meadow like paths cut into an underwater field. But the name can make the animal sound simple, as if it is only a floating cow that wandered into the ocean. The truth is stranger. Dugongs belong to the Sirenians, an ancient group of marine mammals with deep evolutionary roots, relatives of manatees, but shaped for a life that is fully tied to the sea. Their ancestors once walked on land. Over millions of years, limbs changed, bodies rounded, tails widened, and the shoreline became not a boundary, but a home. In the water, the dugong's calmness is almost misleading. It does not move like an animal in a hurry because its entire lifestyle depends on not wasting energy. Seagrass is reliable in the right places, but it is not rich food like fish or meat. To live on it, a large mammal must process huge amounts, feeding for hours, returning to known meadows, and choosing areas where the plants are soft, nutritious, and able to regrow. A single adult can eat tens of kilograms of seagrass in a day. This is not casual nibbling. It is a slow harvest performed by a body that has turned the shallow coast into pasture. That grazing changes the meadow. As a dugong feeds, it does not simply take from the seabed, it edits it. It crops older growth, disturbs sediment, opens trails, and helps maintain younger, more productive patches of seagrass. In that sense, the animal is not just living in the ecosystem, it is shaping it. The phrase "farming the seabed" sounds almost too human, but the effect is real enough. By feeding repeatedly in certain areas, dugongs can influence the structure of seagrass communities, creating a mosaic of regrowth and open feeding trails. Their survival is tied to the meadow, and the meadow's condition is partly shaped by their mouths. The face that does this work is one of the dugong's most important tools. Its eyesight is limited, so the animal depends heavily on touch and memory. Bristles around the mouth help it feel the seagrass as it feeds, searching through the sediment and selecting plants in water that may be cloudy or dim. It comes to the surface to breathe through nostrils set near the top of the snout, then sinks again with barely a ripple. There is no drama in the movement, and that is what makes it powerful. Everything about the dugong suggests an animal that has solved its world through repetition. Remember the meadow, follow the tide, conserve energy, return again. This quiet life has produced one of the strangest cultural echoes in the sea. Dugongs and manatees have long been linked to old mermaid stories, especially from sailors who saw rounded marine mammals rising to breathe or nursing young at the surface. The connection says as much about human imagination as it does about the animal. A dugong seen clearly in daylight is not a glamorous woman with a fishtail. It is a blunt, whiskered herbivore with a heavy body and a calm face. But from a rolling boat, through distance, exhaustion, and salt glare, the human brain can turn almost anything into a legend. The dugong survived in the water. The mermaid survived in the story. Its real life is more fragile than the legend. Dugongs can live for decades, sometimes reaching around 70 years. But that long life comes with a slow rhythm of reproduction. Females do not produce young quickly. A calf stays close to its mother, nursing and learning the geography of safe feeding areas. The bond is quiet but essential. A young dugong must learn where the meadows are, how to move between them, and where danger gathers. Sharks may threaten calves in some areas, but for modern dugongs, the greatest pressures often come from people. Boat strikes, fishing nets, coastal development, hunting in some regions, and the loss or damage of seagrass beds. An animal built for slow endurance struggles when the world changes quickly. Seagrass is the heart of that problem. It grows in shallow, sunlit coastal water, exactly where human activity is often strongest. Runoff can cloud the water and starve the plants of light. Storms can tear beds away. Dredging, pollution, heat stress, and coastal construction can damage meadows that took years to form. When seagrass disappears, a dugong cannot simply become something else. It is not a generalist predator able to switch from reef fish to squid. It is a specialist grazer shaped by millions of years around a particular kind of underwater plant world. To lose seagrass is not to lose scenery. It is to lose the animal's food, map, and future at once. And yet, in the right places, the dugong still feels anciently secure. It moves over the meadow with a soft downward beat of the tail, leaving clouds of sediment that settle back into the blades. Remoras may trail along its body. Small fish investigate the feeding paths. Above, the surface shifts from silver to blue as the day opens. The animal rises, breathes, and returns to the grass. Nothing in its movement looks urgent, but everything is deliberate. It has survived not by mastering violence, but by matching itself to one of the ocean's quietest ecosystems. That is what makes the dugong a different kind of survivor. The frog endured drought by sealing water inside its body. The stick insect disappeared into the visual language of branches. The bearded dragon negotiated with heat. The wombat turned earth and muscle into armor. The dugong survives through slowness, memory, grazing, and dependence on a living meadow that must remain healthy for the whole system to continue. It is gentle, but not weak, ancient, but not invincible. A peaceful giant can survive millions of years in the sea and still be threatened by the simple loss of grass beneath the water. The open ocean should have been the end of the snake's story. A snake is a lung-breathing reptile, born from a lineage shaped on land, built with scales, ribs, jaws, and a body plan that once belonged to soil, roots, rocks, and warm ground. The sea is a different universe. It has no branches to grip, no burrows to vanish into, no dry stones for basking, and no air except at the surface. Salt enters everything. Currents move the world beneath you. Prey can rise, dive, scatter, and disappear into blue distance. For most land reptiles, the ocean is not an invitation, it is a barrier. But somewhere in evolutionary time, one line of venomous Australian region snakes crossed that barrier and kept going until the land behind them became almost irrelevant. A true sea snake moves through water with a confidence that makes its ancestry hard to believe. Its body is still unmistakably serpentine, but the ocean has edited it. The tail has become flattened like a paddle, pushing the animal forward with smooth side-to-side waves. The belly scales, so important for gripping land in many snakes, are reduced in many fully marine species because crawling is no longer the priority. The nostrils sit high on the snout and can close with valves when the snake dives. Every detail shows the same evolutionary decision. This is no visitor passing through the sea. This is a reptile that has made the water its permanent address. Still, the most important rule remains unchanged. It must breathe air. A sea snake has no gills. It cannot forget the surface. At some point, no matter how perfectly it moves through the reef, no matter how deep it hunts among coral heads, rubble slopes, muddy channels, or seagrass beds, it must rise. The movement is usually calm. The snake angles upward, breaks the surface just enough to open its nostrils, fills its lung, and sinks again. There is no panic in it. The surface is not a rescue. It is part of the route. That lung is more than a simple air tank. In sea snakes, it extends far down the body, helping store oxygen and control buoyancy during dives. The animal can remain submerged for long periods, far longer than most people would expect from a reptile. Some species add another impossible-seeming trick. They can absorb part of their oxygen directly through the skin. This is not the same as having gills, and it does not free them from breathing air, but it gives the body extra time. Oxygen dissolved in seawater can pass across highly supplied skin areas into the blood, especially during rest or long dives, while carbon dioxide can also move out. In some species, researchers have found dense blood vessel networks around the head and snout, suggesting that even the brain may receive a small but meaningful underwater oxygen supplement. This is the kind of adaptation that makes the sea snake feel like a finale. The frog absorbed water through its belly. The sea snake, at the far end of the journey, draws oxygen from the sea itself. It has not broken biology's rules completely, but it has bent them so far that the animal seems to sit between categories. It is still a reptile. It is still a snake. Yet it moves, feeds, breeds, and survives in a world that should belong to fish. Salt is the next problem. Every mouthful of prey, every accidental swallow of seawater, every life spent surrounded by brine creates a chemical threat. Too much salt disrupts the body's internal balance. For a land animal, the ocean is not just wet, it is dehydrating in disguise. Sea snakes solve this with specialized salt glands beneath the tongue that help excrete excess salt. The snake flicks and works the mouth, removing what the body cannot afford to keep. Even then, the story is more complicated than people once thought. Some sea snakes still need access to fresh water, especially after rain forms thin lenses on the sea surface. A creature may live its whole life at sea and still depend on the sky to drink. Below the surface, the calm shape becomes a hunter. Sea snakes move through coral crevices, sand channels, seagrass, and reef edges, searching for fish, eels, fish eggs, crustaceans, and other prey depending on the species. Some have narrow heads suited for probing into holes after hidden eels. Others specialize so strongly that their venom becomes less important or even reduced because their food cannot fight back in the same way. But many sea snakes carry venom of remarkable potency, neurotoxic chemistry designed to stop prey quickly in an environment where a wounded fish could vanish into the reef forever. The weapon is extreme because the hunting problem is extreme. In water, hesitation can mean losing the meal. And yet these snakes are often not the aggressive monsters people imagine. Divers may see them glide past with curious calm, sometimes investigating fins, masks, or movement in the water. They are dangerous if grabbed, trapped, or handled carelessly, especially when caught in fishing nets, but in their own habitat they are usually not looking for a fight. This restraint makes sense. Venom is expensive, and a human is not food. A sea snake's greatest weapon exists mainly for prey, not performance. The animal survives not because it attacks everything, but because it almost never has to. Reproduction completes the transformation. Sea turtles return to land to lay eggs. Sea kraits still come ashore, but true sea snakes give birth to live young in the water. The young enter the ocean already part of it, tiny versions of an ancient experiment, with no beach ceremony and no crawl toward waves. The land is not a nursery, the sea is. That one fact makes the evolutionary leap feel complete. Feeding, mating, birthing, breathing, hiding, hunting. The whole life cycle has been pulled offshore. This does not make sea snakes invincible. Their world is vulnerable to fishing bycatch, reef damage, pollution, warming seas, coastal development, and the loss of habitats like seagrass beds and coral systems. Some populations have declined sharply in places where they were once abundant, and many species remain poorly understood. That uncertainty is part of the mystery. An animal can be highly evolved and still disappear before people fully know how it lives. As the final survivor in this journey, the sea snake carries the strongest message. The tree frog survived drought by sealing moisture into a soft body. The stick insect survived by becoming almost invisible. The bearded dragon mastered heat through color and behavior. The wombat turned earth and muscle into a fortress. The dugong endured by grazing through ancient underwater meadows. But the sea snake goes further. It takes the body of a land reptile and rewrites it for saltwater, pressure, currents, venomous hunting, live birth at sea, and breath held beneath an entire blue world. It is calm, beautiful, dangerous, and almost impossible, a survivor that conquered the ocean without ever stopping being a snake.